Greetings, YouTube. Recently, I did a video about how sapient zombies and vampires would have to try to exist in the world if their respective existences did not mesh well with technology. For example, a vampire can't be seen in a mirror, maybe not on cameras, things like that. They'd have to use Blackberries and computers like this to interface because they couldn't use a telephone because they don't have any voices because they have no respiration, yada, yada, yada. If you've seen the video that I've made on that topic, you know what I'm talking about. But that got me thinking. And by the way, I apologize for the noise in the background. Washer's running. Life moves on. Which got me thinking about, and this is going to be horrible because I've probably mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it again, is Anita Blake Vampire Hunter novels. Now, they are very little more than urban fantasy romance novels. Okay, don't think they're anything else. And they are patently absurd because it's our world with a 2 million year history of werewolves and vampires and zombies and stuff, and that wouldn't happen. If magic has existed for 2 million years, the only thing similar between that world and this world would be the geography. There would be no languages, no religions, no nations, no nothing, no societies that would be similar to what we have now. Nothing. It would not be the United States of America with zombies and werewolves and vampires and such. Doesn't work that way. That's absurd. But let's say, for example, we do a Monty Cook World of Darkness thing where one day it just happens. Shoot, what was the GURPS book where that happened? There's a GURPS book where all of a sudden magic returned to the world. It's not like Shadowrun did it, so I mean, yeah, you get the idea. But just one day, magic comes back. It could be a cataclysmic event. It could just happen. And nobody knows why. Could be small, could be subtle, could be very big and showy. You do what you want to do. But one day there is no magic in the world, and the next day there is, and now there are ghosts, and there are zombies, and there are werewolves, and there are vampires. So let's take that world that just happened tomorrow, say, and start thinking about civil liberties. Because that's what I thought of. Because in the Anita Blank Vampire Hunter series of novels, and I am embarrassed to say I read far too many of them. I don't know how many there are. I know I stopped reading them when I stopped reading fiction. But they were light fluff. They were a little dark. They were a little problematic, but they were fun, and I liked some of the characters. So, I guess it's the closest thing I could guess to say I'd ever had as a guilty pleasure. But the vampires had civil liberties, human rights. And it always kind of baffled me when I read them. Like, why would you give civil liberties to a dead guy? But it's been more than a few years since I read them, probably close to 20. Um, and I realized I was wrong. Because let's look at the world of science fiction for a second. Let's look at AIs. AIs acquiring civil liberties and citizenship and being considered citizens is a really old trope. Excuse me. So if AIs can acquire it, if the world can have data in it, like Star Trek, or if there are robots in Star Wars that finally get their goddamn emancipation, and they should, R2D2 and C3PO should be full-fledged citizens, folks. If that happens, why can't vampires and ghosts have their citizenship? Sure, they're dead, but they're no different than a piece of software. Really, they're a mind. They're not a mind in a body like me or a werewolf who is biological, though they also apparently can live for a very long time in many legends. Um, what was this? There was a series once. I can't remember what it was. It might have been a movie even where a werewolf runs in, a new werewolf runs into a guy who like just wanders from place to place. He's basically a mountain man, and he remembers to like the Neolithic era. He remembers wandering across like the world just after the Ice Age ended. I thought that was kind of cool. The actor who played him was also very neat. Don't remember his name, but he was cool. And so if you can have AIs with citizenship, you can have vampires and sapient zombies with citizenship and ghosts, so long as the ghosts don't need a medium. Like if the ghost, I can see the ghost, and I can talk to the ghost, and we can verify the ghost was a person at one point, even if it's a person from 1,000 or 10,000 years ago. They are a person. Then yeah, I think they can have citizenship. But if they have to like be channeled through a medium to speak, like Ghost the movie, that's a problem because that means that a medium could channel multiple ghosts and be a switchboard essentially. And do you give all of those ghosts the citizenship through that person? That person becomes a super citizen. That's politically problematic. But if the ghost can be seen, interacted with, and you could prove that the ghost is real and not just some holographic, projection, and I'm sure in a world like this you could do these things, then yeah, I think that they should in fact have the right to have civil liberties and be considered sapient beings, have human rights, even if they are in fact not human. And of course, werewolves, because they are biological, would never be called into question. That's just going to be a thing, even if whether they've been around for a really long time or they've newly acquired lycanthropy. Always like that word, lycanthropy. Um, so let's talk about vampires and ghosts and AIs all having citizenship. Would you do it in your campaign? Do you think it's a good idea? Um, are there ramifications that I have not considered? Uh, for example, can ghosts have bank accounts? How do they interfere? Not interfere. How do they interact with the world? It's even more difficult for a ghost than it is a vampire, unless the ghosts have some kind of abilities. Because in some games, and I've talked about that here, I can't remember what was it. It was an OGL book I talked about I used a ghost from that book for a video. Um, where they can acquire skills, and like some of those skills, like eventually they could move things physically in the world. They can interact through ectoplasm and things like that. So they could actually interact with the world, but some of them can't. Some of them never physically interact, but they'd be good at psychic powers or reading thoughts or object reading and things like that. So they interact in different ways. So your player can decide what their character does and how they specialize. They become really good investigators in many ways. Because they don't interact physically with the world, but they'd be great at getting information. It's hard to hide things from ghosts when they can walk through walls. Maybe you can. Maybe you put it in a Faraday cage, or an electrical field keeps them out. Like just like a magnetic field of some variety. Sorry, these ideas are just kind of flying into my head at the moment. So let's talk about a world where tomorrow all of this stuff happens, and how we give or don't give the rights to vampires and sapient zombies and ghosts and AIs and such. That sounds like a pretty good, cool idea to me. So let's have a chat.